Hi, and thank you for joining me for another lecture. And friends, today I want to run an idea by you really quickly. Something that has been on my mind for some time now, and I think it can actually help us clarify, illustrate, and ultimately define what a healthy religious relationship with our Creator looks like. And in short, friends, I believe it is optimistic agnosticism. In other words, to be an optimistic agnostic. And really, it's not what it may sound like. In other words, I know that many of my skeptics will only hear agnostic and say that Rabbi Asher Meza is not religious anymore. But friends, I tell you that they could not be further from the truth. Actually, I believe, because I have been an optimistic agnostic for virtually my whole religious experience, it has actually helped me package what I have come to believe or embrace and hand it over to others, mainly because it is belief in God and not knowledge of God that I am handing over. Now, before I go any further, you shouldn't think that this places me in any irreligious category, but rather consider this lecture just a play on semantics, because I actually bet that the vast majority of my co-religionists out there are also optimistic agnostics as well, and they just never were able to properly articulate it. Now, what is an agnostic? Well, apart from the atheist, which means someone who declares that God does not exist, a statement which, if you think about it, is as faithful as someone declaring that he or she is certain that God does exist, an agnostic means someone who's just not absolutely certain in God's existence. And the contrast is seen in the terms themselves, right? An atheist, A, is the negation of theo, of God, while an agnostic also has the negation, but it is attached to gnosis, meaning knowledge, i.e. he does not know, or again, he is not certain that God exists. And an optimistic agnostic is, although someone who is not absolutely certain that God exists, he or she surely hopes he does. And like I said, by clarifying this issue, this will actually better equip us to be able to package what we believe so as to better distribute those beliefs to unbelievers. How? Well, first of all, one of the major setbacks put into place by the Kiruv or outreach world in general is the claim that they can prove without a shadow of a doubt that God exists. And I'm sure you've seen it. Rabbis having whole seminars claiming that they can prove that not only God exists, but that the Torah is the undeniable words of God. And friends, I'm religious, and I'm actually even a six-day creationist. I don tefillin daily and believe in the authority of Chazal. And I'm still telling you that any claim, at least till today, that someone can prove to you the existence of God or the divine authorship of Torah as 100% true without a shadow of a doubt is nonsense. And this blatant charismatic effort to influence with empty words ultimately hurts us more than it helps the Kiruv movement. Now, I'm in no way saying that good arguments cannot be made for God's existence, because I deeply believe in God. But to say that we could, like I said, at least today, absolutely know and prove that God exists is a bit absurd. In other words, there's a difference between believing in God and knowing God. And please, don't get me wrong, friends. For sure it's great. I mean, it would be a great zchut to get to know God. Even the Rambam brings this down as part of a mitzvah. But he actually writes elsewhere that if he actually knew God, he would be God. So, that's neither here or there. But anyways, friends, the reason I think this lecture is so necessary and important is because nothing tarnishes or has tarnished religion till today like the true believer. Individuals who become too heavenly good that they become no earthly good. People who in their pursuit of God give up this world, and ultimately not just make their families, but their co-inhabitants suffer. And all this most likely build off of a supposed reality embraced outside of the pages of Torah. Because as you know, the Torah rarely even touches on the spiritual. And friends, one reason I believe the Jewish world always tries to claim knowledge over just belief is that in the Jewish world, people are scared of the word faith. I mean, how many times did I myself hear from over-pompous rabbis when I would teach on faith, saying, "What are you teaching, Rabbi Asher? Christianity? In Judaism, we know things. We don't need faith." Yeah, right. Now, you can, from a personal perspective, be fully convinced that God exists. Heck, maybe God appeared to you, and then you know he exists without a shadow of a doubt. However, because that is only a personal experience and cannot be packaged and handed over to someone else, it still can only exist as a belief, at least when the outside world is concerned. And you must know that this is not the case with the majority of religious folks out there, people who actually had supernatural experiences. And for the amount of Jews who have had such an experience, I can assure you that there are at least thousands of more Christians and Muslims who've had a similar experience with their representation of God. And friends, one reason why I think that the atheist or even the pessimistic agnostic world is growing is because we as religious individuals have not made the case for a healthy, optimistic belief that there should be a God, instead of the just, here you go, take this God. And honestly, I believe that this is not only the only way to come to a healthy belief in a creator, but the way that an ethical creator would rather individuals come to belief in him. In other words, to first have them make a case for the need of a creator and a lawgiver in the first place. In other words, anyone who comes to belief in a creator only because some rabbi in a seminar shows some slides and then interjects terms like, this is a fact, or this proves 100% that God and Torah are true. In other words, anyone who is fooled into belief or acceptance out of fear or absolute claims that are easily disprovable as at least perhaps theories and not scientific fact, which is what something would have to be for it to be absolute. Anyone has, in this case, has, in my opinion, ultimately built his whole relationship with his God on a shaky foundation. Which is why, in every one of my lectures, I always try to separate between Torah, Halakha, and Agadah, between what's required and what's optional. Because the truth is that the first step to a healthy belief in a creator is knowing what the creator actually requires of you, and what was later developed and inserted by man. Now, in Judaism, we have man-made laws that the Creator himself, according to the text, told us to keep. But again, these laws are still man-made, in other words, fallible, and not in any way considered Torah themselves, which is another thing that is mentioned in these seminars. Not just a claim that they can prove Torah is absolutely true, but Agadot and Midrashim as well. This is why when a Jew goes off the derech, when he strays from the path, he typically never returns, because he has not just fallen away from what he has not been able to prove in Torah, which, might I add, is not a book that requires so much faith, but action. But rather, he has realized that he is now also bound to accept and try to justify countless legends and folklore as absolutely true, as well as thus corrupting his capacity for faith in general. Like the story I heard about the Jewish kid who considered becoming observant and then walked out during a Shabbat meal because his host insisted that the notion of covering the challahs so as not to hurt their feelings while making kiddush was real, or undeniably true, which makes you sympathize with secular Jews at least a bit, because honestly, in terms of Jewish outreach organizations, what's really their alternative to a secular lifestyle? What, Chabad? No, friends, the only reason we should ever come to a belief in a creator in the first place is only because that creator has proven himself to be ethical, as our creator did with the moral and life-changing instructions in what we call Torah. As a matter of fact, I've even encouraged atheists that it would actually behoove them to live life as God did exist for at least their well-being and the well-being of their children, then sealing their psychological fate, and not just theirs but their children's as well, with the idea that life ultimately has no purpose, with no ultimate consequences. In other words, all studies lean towards a notion that believers in a higher moral power are not only more charitable, but live generally happier lives than those who don't. I mean, honestly, what decent person wouldn't at least want there to be a force for divine justice in the world, where the good and evil ultimately get what they deserve? And another reason I believe that the Creator sanctions this approach and has made himself completely scientifically unprovable is because he wants you to come to a belief in him because you need him, not because he just is. In other words, what makes a creator our God is not that he is all powerful and thus has the power to hurt us, or even because he may have created the world. No, friends, what makes him the God of gods is first and foremost that he is good, i.e. that the Torah, his instructions for living and bettering this planet, actually work. And this, in my opinion, is what these seminars should be based on, and not on whether the existence of God can be proven, but rather on how Torah and living a life of Torah actually works and how it actually betters this world. And I think that the reason they are scared to either come to or to instruct others on this provable conclusion is because this would have to ethically force them to actually spread Torah unconditionally and undiscriminately to every human being. And that's it. Which is why one theme touched upon in these God-proving seminars is heaven and a punishment of hell. Two concepts that the Almighty himself didn't think important enough to mention in Torah. Which is why I've heard people lose faith in the Creator because they hear of great rabbis admit that sometimes they themselves even struggled with belief. When this, my friends, is not only normal, but it's healthy. Actually, that's what Israel means, a people that struggles with Hashem, that struggles with a creator, or even a belief in a creator. In other words, it's through acknowledging that struggle to all of humanity where the need for a good God becomes clear to people. That nothing worth having just falls on our laps, but sometimes it's like forcing a square peg into a round hole. Struggling with what we feel within ourselves or what we see around us, exclaiming that there needs to be a better way. There must be one. That's what being Israel means, not just escaping this world for another. So anyways, to end, can I prove that God exists? No. However, what I can prove is a need for a universal law code that actually works. In other words, that actually makes this world better, which I believe is present in Torah. Which then makes me believe that this document could not have been developed when it was by human endeavor alone, but must have been created by a higher force. And this force is what we call God. Friends, for more information on everything Jewish, please visit TorahJudaism.org. Thank you.